Oh, yes. I didn't pay, I thought she said the other one, because I was shaking my head.
Oh, she did. Oh, okay, gotcha.
One minute, one minute, one minute.
There's some time for one mashed potatoes.
No. No.
They are that good.
Good evening. I, Dr. Lasagna Flowers, President of Duncanville ISD Board of Trustees, call this meeting to order. Let the record show that a quorum of the Board of Trustees is present, that the meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Our mission at Duncanville ISD is to engage, equip, and empower all scholars to achieve their unique potential. We will now move to opening ceremonies. Please stand for the pledge. Oh, okay, well, I'll make. Trustee Phillips said we're supposed to pray before we do the pledge, so you can have a seat. All right, we'll start over. Okay, God before country. Father, we come and we just thank you for this day. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy, and we thank you for the privilege to be able to serve. Help us to do what's in the best interest of students. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
You may be seated. We do not have any communications from citizens regarding a pending agenda item. We will move to the budget workshop. I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Goree.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flowers, and good evening, all trustees. Thank you so much for assembling for our second budget workshop. Thank you, trustees, for also bringing your budget notebooks back tonight. We'll invite our CFO to the podium, and Ms. Mayo will come and she will do a presentation. Trustees, the PowerPoint is in your binders, and the pages are numbered. I do ask that you jot those questions down as we go through the presentation, and we will take an opportunity at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. You also may have questions from other documents that are in the binder. I would ask that after the presentation, questions have been answered. We will then look at any other questions that you have from the binder. Please note that we did give you a replacement page for page 8, and that's located at your stations. This time, I will turn the program over to our CFO. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Flowers, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Goree. As the 89th legislative session moves forward, we're carefully tracking developments that will shape our funding outlook, including proposed adjustments to the basic allotment and evolving state accountability measures. Our focus this evening is to ensure our budget process reflects effective cost management, strategic priorities, and unwavering commitment to student achievement. Together, we'll build a budget that sustains and advances the missions of Duncanville ISD. So our budget priorities that we have been focusing on throughout the entire budget development cycle is listed here: fiscal stewardship and operational excellence, ensure budget alignment with the district's strategic priorities and a focus on student achievement, implement a competitive and market-aligned salary structure, and maintain a healthy fund balance. These are the topics that we'll be focusing on today. Legislative updates as we move through the legislative process, budget assumptions and unknowns, competitive compensation, and then our proposed 25-26 budgets. So the update right now, there are many, and I have about 5 pages of bills that are going for committee this week, but we're going to focus on 3 today. Senate Bill 2, Education Savings Account Vouchers. After much fanfare and heated debate in the Texas House, it was voted out of the House and back to the Senate. The Senate did vote last Thursday to accept all the amendments from the House and send the legislation to Governor Greg Abbott's desk to be signed into law. So Senate Bill 2 is on the way to the governor with the amendments from House to be signed into law. House Bill 19 is still in the Ways and Means Committee, but it is something that might directly affect us if it is passed. This is legislation that was discussed in the 88th legislature as well. It did not pass then, so we don't know, but it does affect us directly. It creates new INS debt limits. So right now, about 80% of school districts across the state do sometimes choose to adopt an INS rate or keep their consistent INS rate. Any additional tax revenue received from that rate, they are utilizing that to defease bonds, basically paying them off early. That is a very fiscally sound and economically responsible opportunity. It creates debt capacity for future bond needs, and so if this is passed, it could limit that opportunity. The other is November-only bond elections, so we've heard this before. Many times we take our bonds to May because oftentimes November is very busy. And so it gives us more of an opportunity to focus on school district needs if we were able to take it to May. And so that could change some of the future outlooks for school districts. So we are watching that one very closely, and our financial advisors are also watching those very closely. House Bill 2 is one we've been really closely following. The House did amend, so it came out of the House Education Committee and into the full House. The House did amend this, and it passed House Bill 2 back to the Senate. And so now House Bill 2 sits in the Senate to be approved or with amendments. So I don't know the schedule for that yet, but it is going to be coming up. Right now, that bill talks about an increase in basic allotment. So it's increased. So it started out a little bit lower. Now it's up to $395, which would make the basic allotment $6,555. And what that means is the allotment that we get per ADA in our state revenue funding template. So that would be an increase. The way the law reads right now is 40% of any year-over-year increase would go to salaries for all staff except administration. There was an amendment to the current state of the bill in the House that said 75% of that 40 would go to teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors. And that's consistent with the current law. The current law is 30% and then 75% of the 30. So that's consistent to what we did in 2019 with House Bill 3. The current estimates, we've received estimates from 3 different sources, and they all are around $6.781 million year over year for Duncanville ISD. Keep in mind, this is not just an increase to basic allotment. There's also some special population increases that do also attribute to this number. And so this is the total impact that we could see the way the bill is now. And just for your frame of reference, 40% of that is 2.7, 60% is $4 million. So 40% would go to staff. If the amendment for 75% of the 40 goes through, it's listed there as the $2.034 million. And then 60% could be used for further raises, could be used for operational expenses to reduce the deficit, but there would be more flexibility in that area. I was listening to some legislative updates today, and some of the bills that were in the Senate were focused on tenure of teacher and giving some specific allocations to different tenures in our pay scale. This bill doesn't currently have that, but that could happen when it starts to be reviewed in the Senate. But just to give y'all a heads up, that could be coming. I keep pushing my computer button. These are the budget assumptions, and these have maintained consistent throughout the whole process. Fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. We're still looking at a taxable assessed value growth of 3%, enrollment 11,232, and average daily attendance 9,987. This budget is based on current legislation and does not include any of the estimates we might see in House Bill 2. These are kind of the unknowns. So as you know, a lot of times for a June 30th district, we don't know our tax rate since there's some things that we don't know. So we're forecasting that out. We do have a lot of support from DCAD. So we are looking at tax rates to be finalized in July. We will be submitting documentation to publish our tax rates to the Dallas Morning News according to law. When we do that, we will be basing it on estimates. And so when we come back in September to adopt the rate, of course, then we'll have the actual rate for adoption after certified values are delivered. Property values are estimated based on DCAD analysis. So right now, I had a preliminary conversation with DCAD, as I mentioned before, and they felt like 3% was a good number to be using now. We will get our preliminary values on May 12th. So our first preliminary values will come on May 12th, and our second preliminary values will come on May 27th. We are still continuing to work through staffing for budget impacts. Any required teacher raises approved by the legislature or the board are not currently in this budget. Any changes to the basic allotment, so as I said, it's based on current legislation. And then property insurance increase, so I do have good news. We met with our property insurance agent, and they do believe we're gonna see a decrease, which felt wonderful. I was not expecting that, in our overall property premiums. We, of course, will not know that until we bring that to the board in September, but he was going to let us know mid-May, hopefully before our next budget workshop, if he still feels like, if he felt like that in that date in May, then it's probably going to be. So that would save us about $200,000. So we're hopeful for that. And then any further cost containment strategies as we go through the process. And you, as we go through the year, so the budget can always be amended. So I think as we're always looking through the budget, reviewing positions, doing all that deep detail analysis as we go through settle up, and we really start to understand the effects of our temporary campus closures and some of those changes, I think we'll still continue and working closely with HR to make sure that any of those additional things can just be always coming out of the budget, always reviewing cost containment to make sure that we are being fiscally and efficiently responsible. Did it again, okay. And so raise considerations. So these would be, this could be two things. So considerations independent of House Bill 2. And so I'm just going to jump over to the next slide to a second, and then I'll go back to it. But just to remind you, when we reviewed this at our last budget workshop, just to kind of give you an idea of where Duncanville ISD is with our neighboring districts. And so when we're looking at that, just to kind of think through any raise considerations independent of House Bill 2. So I know that there was some brief discussion of working on some teacher changes, and then furthering that discussion once we receive the final information from House Bill 2. So right now, the teacher salary increase for $2,000 is a budget impact of about 1.751. And keep in mind, these figures are the general fund only. So we may have more teachers in our district, but they're federally funded. And so while they would still obviously receive the raise, we're more focused on the general fund because that's the adopted budget. This does include benefits. And so the new teacher starting salary with a $2,000 increase to the pay scale would be $60,500. $3,000 would be $61,500, and $4,000 would be $62,500. As you'll see up in the white box where the 2, 3, and 4,000 are, there are also percentages and brackets next to those. Those are estimated percentage increases just to maintain continuity when we look at the percentage increases for other staff. It's to give you a frame of reference for what this would mean for teachers. And so as we move into this slide, we were back to having the discussion about where we were, and to maintain a competitive market rate is one of our district budget strategy priorities. And thinking through, I think the conversation before was, if every district has an opportunity to give a raise, where do we fall in competitive comparison after that? Is there review and ideas that we would like to consider prior to legislation, and maybe some ideas to review after that legislation? And so this is just a reminder of where we are in relation to our peers. And then I did want to point out that we have starting pay for our certified bilingual and SPED self-contained teachers is $62,500. So we are trying to be competitive there so that we can attract those highly qualified bilingual and SPED self-contained teachers to Duncanville ISD. And there are not other districts in our area don't offer this additional pay scale. So we are proud of that and hopeful to be able to encourage increases in those areas as well. These are compensation scenarios for staff other than teachers. And so we wanted to list them individually here so that you could kind of see how they would affect each pay group. In your binder, there is a list of who falls into these categories if you would like to see position by position. Keep in mind, you might see one custodian. That doesn't mean we have one. I just consolidated those since they were the same. And so here you can kind of review what percentage goes with each area. So one thing we've really been talking about kind of in my world is when we're starting to consider raises in the midst of this legislative session, depending on the language of the law, and we don't know that now, but we know from history, the language of the law then was such that if a raise was adopted before the law was into effect, that raise that was adopted did not meet the requirements of the new law, and districts had to give the raise twice. And so in thoughtful consideration, I just want to make sure that the board has all of the tools necessary to make the decision that while communication can be had of the board's expectations, that adoption and implementation might be best preserved till after the law is in place. And the budget can be amended. So we are legally required to adopt a budget by June 30th, but we can know, and as you approve amendments all throughout the year, that's certainly something that can be done. And then the compensation manual can be adopted at that time as well, and we can make the appropriate raise impacts in September. This is the 25-26 general fund estimates. So this is really just high level, and we're going to get into the details much like we did in the last presentation, but I do have more details as requested. So as you know, right now we are expecting about a We have $19 million deficit, and for next year, $18 million. But as we go through the details of this, and this is what we have been talking about, is we expect to have estimated historical vacancy saves of $6 million. That's what I am expecting this year based on forecasts and analysis on month to month. We did an ESSER 3 reclass before the end of the ESSER 3 financing period of $400,000. We have historically saved about $2 million in non-payroll, and it does appear to be that we're going to be in line for that. Many purchasing deadlines have already ended, and so I think that's probably going to be a solid number. And then we have position reductions through attrition, and you do have a list there of some 24, 25. And while some of the decisions, all of those decisions to reduce those positions were done at the end of the last fiscal year, they were done through attrition. So as the people left the position, we captured the savings back. So while the decision was made to reduce them in the prior fiscal year, they were still in the budget. And so when we're talking about numbers to numbers, that's how we get there, by pulling those out. And so right now, it's expected to have a net impact to fund balance of about $9.4 million. We are still working with the support and really being driven by Dr. Nix's department, the Federal Programs Department. We're doing a concentrated review from all funding sources, and we are likely going to have some saves from the general fund because we're able to utilize federal funds in a more efficient way. So we're grateful for that work. So we're just whittling around down at that negative $9 million. So 25, 26 end of year projections. So again, we started with total net impact of $18 million. The current expected adjustments of one-time and total ongoing, on the next slide, I'll really dig into those details. But before we go, I just wanted to talk about those expected saves. Now, please know they're expected. If everybody takes a position with our great new pay scale and we have no vacancies, which I don't know if that's possible, then certainly the $6 million vacancy could go down, but I think that's something we might all celebrate. Historical non-payroll saves, the same. If everyone spent all their money, that's just something we look at through the year. But when you see that for 5 years back, you kind of expect that to occur. And then we do expect, working again with Dr. Nix's awesome team, a federal evaluation and reclass that could affect next year's budget, general fund budget, by about $1 million. And so that's going to be great work to get us down to -7. And so I know that it's still not balanced, but it is great work. We are getting in the right direction. Also, please consider, if we do receive state revenue from House Bill 2, and it is $4 million, and the board does decide to use some of that state revenue, it will offset that $7 million, and we'll be in even a better place. And then as we go through settle up for next year, looking at all the positions and continuing to evaluate salaries, we may even become closer to that. So the next slide kind of identifies that one area, current expected adjustments, total one-time, total ongoing. So this is to give you an idea of the details that are being reduced and requested. So the top boxes will only affect 25, 26 only. So that means like the $25,000 for salary study for TASB, that'll only be given in 1 year. It'll be taken out of the budget for year 2 because it's only needed once. And now that is something HR might request to do every couple of years, but it's only one time. And then the ongoing 25 and 26 future years, when we change the middle school PLCs, those will come out forever unless something is added back. The same with the instructional support specialist. That goes out forever unless the board approves to add something back. And then recruitment budget, and then you'll see all the line items there. So those are items that were requested and reviewed with great detail and analysis by the SLT team, and then reviewed by Dr. Gorey and the budget team. Even with some of the adds there, you'll see it's still a reduction to the total overall budget of a little over $2 million. The fund balance estimates are listed here, so we are still in a very favorable place. So even if we end 24-25 at negative 9.4 million, we will still have, it's a little over 5 months, I think it's like 5.14 months, we'll still have a little over 5 months of fund balance. And so even though it's possible we could end 25-26 with a deficit, as long as we're continuing to do the work to bring that down, we are going to be in a much better position. Another bit of positive news is in the legislation, there's discussion of, for declining ADA districts, there may be some additional funding associated with that, would additionally help support Duncanville ISD. And then there is some some continuing increases to the basic allotment. Now, it's a little offset by some of the changes to the golden penny, but I think all in all, it'll be a positive impact to have that basic allotment be triggered for growth every 2 years versus it's sitting, I think the first time was like 40 years and now it's been since 2019. So I think that'll be a positive change for school districts. So that'll further support the initiatives. Nutrition Services Fund is listed here. You'll see for 24, 25, and 25, 26, there was a negatives listed there. Those were spend down plans as required by TDA. So it's not truly a negative. It doesn't mean a negative thing. It means an investment into the student nutrition program as required by law. And then this is the Debt Services Fund. We do expect to have a balanced budget as of now. And that's largely because we increased our tax rate with the bond, and so we're celebrating that, but we are generating tax revenue to sustain our current debt service. As we pay down that debt service, then we will have some opportunities to keep the rate the same or review that for the future. Our next steps is discuss any changes or impacts to local, state, and federal funding. That's a requirement for our first rating, so we'll do that at the May 12th board budget workshop. And May 19th, we'll have our regular board meeting. May 28th is an internal request. And then June 3rd, I'll be submitting the notice of public meeting to discuss budget and proposed tax rate to the Dallas Morning News as required by law. And then on the 16th, we will discuss the adoption and discuss the proposed tax rate. Upcoming budget workshop agenda, and of course, by request, this could change, but this is just an idea for now. A presentation of the final budget. And so anything that comes out of today will be added and reviewed and presented on May 12th. Just discuss the requirement for the first rating and discussion of final estimates for the legislative agenda. So hopefully by May 12th, we are going to know a lot more about where House Bill 2 is going to be, and we'll be able to, while we won't be adopting that at the time, it will give the board an opportunity to make some more solid and sound decisions at that time. And now we're arrived at questions.
Trustee Fahey?
You mentioned the, what page? It would have been page 8, I think we were talking about. But that's when you mentioned the ESL, the 62.5. Is that for 2-year contract?
For the certified bilingual and SPED self-contained,
Right.
I'm gonna have to defer to Ms. Brown on, is it
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the contracts.
Well, that's what page we were on. I mean, it wasn't listed. You told us about it. Yeah.
Good evening, Board President Flowers, Board of Trustees, Dr. Gorey. No, the 62.5 is the annual salary for SPED and self-contained and certified bilingual teachers, but it is not a 2-year contract. They receive 1-year contracts annually like all other teachers.
Okay, thank you. But haven't we had some of the contracts in the past where they had to they had to commit to staying 2
The
years?
sign-on bonus.
Okay, that was a sign, okay.
Yes, so they
Sign.
continue to receive the sign-on bonus, which
Okay.
is $7,000. And so
Okay.
they get half the first year, and then the second year they get half. And they also have a bilingual teacher stipend in addition to that.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Trustee Phillips, I'm sorry, Trustee McNeely.
These raises right here on this one you gave us,
Yes, sir.
how does that affect our bottom line?
Thank you. So for example, for the 2,000, so if the board elected to move forward with the 2,000 scenario of 1.751, then it would further increase the deficit by 1.71. So that would be 8.9, 8.8, 8.9 deficit. So that is just on top of these figures.
All of these in the next one would be 2.6 and
Yes, sir.
5.
Yes, sir.
And this is without any money coming from the state.
Yes, sir.
If we pick one of these, then what comes from the state will be on top of this.
If you pick one of these prior to the signing of the law, yes. Yes.
When's the signing of the law?
It gets signed to, like the mid of June, I think is when, I want to say the 21st, but I think it might be a little before that. But it really depends on what is the language of the law when it's final. So if the language of the law says, for, anything adopted, or if it says start July 1st or September 1st, I think the old law says start September 1st of the next year. So raises that were adopted prior to that didn't count, I guess, for lack of better words.
Can I follow up on that
Please,
question?
oh, of course.
So, assuming that we wait until the adoption of the law, then how would you answer Coach McNeely's question?
If no raises were considered until the adoption of the law, then that 1.7 could go to the 2.0 million listed as the 75% in this slide.
I'm sorry, will you say that one more time?
Yes.
Say it slower.
Yes, okay. It's very complicated. So if nothing is adopted, then the current budget doesn't assume any additional obligations. Once the law's passed, based on current amendments, we would be required to spend estimated $2 million for teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors. If the decision was made to wait, then the funds from House Bill 2 could theoretically be used to pay for that $2,000 increase.
Can I add one thing that, please, Ms. Mayo? And what I would say, though, is in that scenario, we would not be catching up with other districts. If you look at the slide, the one that Coach McNeely is referencing, this slide catches us up with other districts, and then we would use those other funds to keep up because everyone's going to receive those additional funds. So if we adopted something, like if we did adopt 2,000, or let's just say 2,000, we would just know that that would catch us up with where other districts currently are, and that additional revenue would continue, would give us the opportunity to stay caught up. for lack
To
of a better
be
word.
competitive and
Competitive,
marketable
right,
to,
right.
yes, absolutely. Because every district will be required to give that same amount.
Go through that again and go
So-
slower than that.
Here's the question. I think I misunderstood when you said if we adopt before the budget, then we have to do it again. I mean, before the law.
That is possible depending on, and that happened before, so I'm assuming that could happen again.
How stupid would it be to adopt a raise before we know what we got?
I think the idea would be, or could be, to say, regardless if the legislature gives us anything, we might have an obligation to be marketable and competitive with the areas because,
If they didn't give us anything, then these, if we decided the $4,000, that's all on us. That will make our, general fund $4 million less, or three, whatever.
yes, more, yes, less. Yes.
Okay.
And if, I'm sorry, go ahead, Coach, that's your question.
Go ahead, now, somebody asked it, I'm still thinking.
Okay, so if we
Slowly,
adopted
but I'm still
the 2,000 and the law passes and we have the additional 4 million, we could amend the budget and add to the 2,000? Is that what you're saying? I mean, yes. No, the first lot.
Yes, except for it's 6 million, not 4.
That we're getting.
So we would be required to spend the additional 2. We would have an opportunity to spend up to 6.
Okay.
I would imagine we would want to use some of that to reduce the deficit, but you certainly could do that.
And that's an option?
That's an option, yeah, because you have flexibility with the 60%. Now, if I could add one thing is, due to the number of teacher vacancies that we have, we do contract with Elevate. And so when we're filling positions, if we're able to attract positions in more areas than just teachers, but in special ed, then we could offset some contract costs too, because the board approved the Elevate contract at $1 million.
Brandy, would you go back through the current estimated?
Is that a company?
Right, it's our virtual learning platform that we use to fill vacancies at the high school. And that's a contract that the districts have for the last probably 3 years.
Telling me stuff like that, don't assume I know it.
Agree,
Tell it to me.
agree, yeah.
Yes,
That's what
thank
that
you.
is. Coach, let me ask, let me get her to, Brandy, start with the current estimate where you got the 6.7 million, and would you talk the board through that again?
Yes, and so with the items in House Bill 2, when some of our experts, like the Equity Center and the Texas Association of School Business Officials, and actually TEA gave to Senator West, we had 3 different scenarios. They took all the information from House Bill 2 as it currently stands and said, if this passes, you could receive $6.781 million. It's an estimate, so with all the items that are in it.
And then that has to be used as like you're talking about the 60 and the 40% and all that stuff for raises. That part of that 6 million, or we could use it all for raises if we wanted to.
That's correct. We are required to use 40% for salaries other than administration. And then the 60% is flexible, the way the law states now.
And the 75% under there?
The 75%, so of the 40% that's allocated, this is where it starts to get, of the 40% that is slated for salaries, 75% of that 40, according to the amendment, must be used for teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors.
And what I would offer to the board is that the sheet where we do the scenario, the 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 is independent of this money. These are dollars that we believe we need to do even if the state does nothing. Even though it will certainly increase our deficit, we believe that these dollars will increase our opportunities to not only maintain, but to attract teachers to the district. And that just raises our level of accountability with reducing in other areas of the budget as we move forward. And that's the advantage of us having over 5 months in our fund balance, is that we do have a little wiggle room so that we can attract teachers.
As we're wiggling through this and doing the scenario, I want to use the 4,000. I want to use as much as we can, as much as we can get out of this. From my estimates from later on, I want to give them at least 4,000.
Of the estimated impact from House Bill 2.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so
I think I understand.
I think I understand, yes.
Well, see, I'm telling you, if I'm talking about the 4,000, and then we'll worry about the 6 million when it comes on, we may can give more than that.
well, my question is, if we do the 4 million,
4 million.
the 4,000,
5 million.
that, yes, the 3, so I'm trying to understand as far as the law is concerned. So if we use the 4,000, which is 6.8%,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the law is passed, does any percentage of that count towards the 40 that we have to give to teachers?
If it reads the way it did in 2019 House Bill 3, then it would not. You would have to give additional raise on top of that
Okay.
to
so-
satisfy the requirements of the law.
So how much would that be?
I mean, it would depend on how much the board determines to elect of
I'm saying, the 4,000, how much would that be?
that we'd have to add on
How
top.
much more raise would that be?
It'd be another 2 million to go on top of that. And so, I don't know the math, 6, 7, I don't know, getting close to almost 10%. But then when you look at our comparison districts, so that would put us at 62.5, and then another estimated 262, I mean, we would be more than, well, we might be up there with Arlington or MISD.
But they would add on more money too.
They would just be adding,
They would add
yeah.
on more too. So in essence, you would be taking yourself, if you look at this, you would be looking at 62.5. So you would put yourself in between, I guess that would be Midlothian and Irving. And we're going to assume that everyone's going to add on about the same amount. So I think that's a fair way to look at that.
After the, yes, legislation is.
And I understand that. I want to remain competitive on this and what it looks like, but I don't want to set our raises for what we do for our teachers and say, oh, well, we could get within 300, but or 3,000 of them, and we can save this much money. I want to do as much for our teachers as we can do. I don't give a damn about this stuff. I'm talking about our teachers. So this slide doesn't mean anything to me unless we're paying 40,000 and somebody's paying 60. I want to do something I want the teachers to get as much as we can give them. And if that puts us up way up, fine. If it puts us in the middle, fine. I don't give a damn about that. I just want to give what we can give to the teachers. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes,
I do.
yes.
I mean, I want to be competitive, but I'm not gonna look at this chart before I decide what kind of raise I want to give our teachers.
Trustee Fahey.
Thank you. Could any of these funds be used like we have in the past? And I don't know what we called them, bonuses or stipends, like right before Christmas, or does it have to be within a salary, or can we dish some out?
It all depends on the way it's written, but in the past, it had to be a salary that was TRS eligible, and it had to be adopted prior to September 1 and listed in the compensation manual. So it was listed as it had to be salaries. Now, in the
Okay.
past, I think we used ESSER, that we gave retention stipends and things
Okay,
like
so
that.
that would have been all ESSER those years that we had okay.
If you had retention or those, you
Right.
probably paid them over the year in lump sums, yes.
I think we had a paycheck right before Christmas, wasn't it, one lump sum? Yeah, yeah.
Then
Okay,
that
thank
would have
you.
been an ESSER.
But that was
Okay,
ESSER,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am,
All right,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
which is gone.
That was trying to get us through the pandemic, yes.
Trustee Colton.
I got another.
Can everybody turn their mics off, please?
Question regarding this slide.
Oh, this is, no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I have a question. So, our school grades were released last week, and I want to know how we're prioritizing academic achievement in this budget.
That's a great question. So I can speak to from a finance perspective. We may need to call on some of our academics experts to do that. I think that's why one of the primary reasons that we are looking at doing a raise before the law so that we can be marketable and competitive. And that's one way that, from my perspective, that we're trying to prioritize our students is getting quality staff in the classroom. And being a competitive district so people are coming to work here and filling our vacancies. And I think that's an investment when we think about increasing ADA percentage has been one of our primary goals, and having strong teachers in the classroom is going to be fundamental in that work going forward. But that's from my finance perspective.
Okay, so is anyone able to answer from a programmatic perspective?
Right. I would invite Dr. Nix and Dr. Goodman. Two things that they can speak to, one being our middle school PLC change of structure, and that as well as our ISS structures and things that we've done there, and anything else that they'd like to share as we've gone through this budget process.
Good evening, Madam President, Board, and Dr. Goree. I will start by just talking about some of the things that Dr. Goree just mentioned, really around staffing. And so you ask about prioritizing. As we've looked at campus shifts for next year, one of our campuses that we've spoken about is Bill Hart's, and we've talked about the additional staff that will be there to support that as far as it relates to interventionists. Those are things that typically it was traditionally staffed the same. Some of those things will change, and that has been prioritized in the budget going forward. When we look at the change in the middle school PLC, we've talked about that PLC going away, but we have structures in place so that we can prioritize having some time every 3 to 6 weeks, so that they can be pulled and have a PLC definitely together. Also, the addition of the way that we're using our instructional coaches for next year. So those are some things that are changed that are also included in this budget that will shift.
Can that be documented somewhere?
Yes, ma'am, for sure.
Okay. Well, I do have another question regarding the budget for '26. But I don't know if Dr. Nix wanted to address the board.
Thank you, President Flowers, members of the board, Dr. Goree. Everything that Dr. Goodman says, I concur with. I would also like to, as you said, how are we prioritizing the budget? You know, most of the time when a school district goes into a budget challenge or a process, they may not prioritize the things that have the greatest impact on students first. So for an example, what we find is that school districts may not prioritize slashing personnel or support for campuses. But what Dr. Gurry, what Ms. Mayo, what we've done as a district is we have not just looked at, well, how do we just cut all the support to campuses? We've taken a good, hard look at the instructional materials that are provided to the campus, the support that is provided to the campus, and prioritizing that as a budgetary need. And so then by going line by line, precept by precept, really program by program, Dr. Gurry is always, all right, what do the campuses need? What support is vital for them? And then what do we need to rethink? So in addition to things like restructuring our ISS process, in addition to things like our instructional materials and how we are making sure that we're not cutting back on things that would hurt the schools or harm instruction. That's always at the forefront of the conversations that we're having, while still looking at where can we cut that doesn't have the greatest impact on losing support for campuses. So that's another perspective that I just wanted to add. As we start to prioritize this budget, Ms. Mayo, I tell you what, she has an instructional mind when it comes to money, which is a little different than what I've been used to working with CFOs, but she's just very instructionally focused. Dr. Gurry, of course, is instructionally focused. So the conversations start with, what are we going to cut? Where can we save money, but that doesn't hurt the campus, that doesn't have the greatest impact on instruction? Because if you're not careful, you'll start cutting everything and not think about the impact on the campus. And that has not been our process moving forward.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering where that is documented, because we owe, the community an answer for our performance. And I know that, there are a number of things that we have considered and that we're doing. And so it would be good if we can say, we will be implementing, X, Y, and Z. And, the dollars associated with that. Like, we can't cut. We're here to educate students. And so we've got a budget, but it can't drive that. We've got to be able to educate the students and ensure that they get a good education. And so any budget that's built around just dollars,
Yep.
that's not what we're about.
Yep.
So if, I know that you all have, considered it, it just hasn't been shared, in a manner that can be communicated
That's
well.
good.
So, yeah, I have additional questions regarding the budget for Mrs. Mayo.
And we will provide the board with a detailed list of those academic focuses that drive the budget,
That would be great.
even to the deficit. I mean, because we could have cut the budget and just start cutting, but that was not what we saw as the best way to do it.
Thank you. So on slide 11, on the proposed budget for 26, the total local revenue, I'm assuming that is property taxes? What is that?
It is, the majority of that number is local property taxes. It also includes items like ticket sales or, rental use that are some small things. It also includes our investment income from our pools, our investment pools.
Okay, because I know that we're anticipating a 3% increase in property taxes. However, if you look at the trend from 5 to 6, we see a $2.8 million decrease. And so I guess what is the reason for that?
We will be experiencing some M&O tax compression as triggered by the law. So that is where the decrease comes in there. But just to kind of let you know, the way the current state funding model is set up is that as it does take into consideration the change of local tax revenue. So fundamentally, if all things stay the same, so if ADA stays the same and your tax rate or tax rate stays fundamentally the same with the pennies, then your total revenue is going to be very similar from year to year. So even though we might see a reduction in local revenue, you can see that the state revenue has increased. And so any kind of reductions in overall total revenue there are likely attributed to a reduction of ADA.
Okay, and then in the expense part of it, I think 8 million in reductions have been identified. Where is that in the proposed budget, or 6 million, whatever?
So we've identified we're going to see about $2 million in saves overall. So when you look at the way that's going to affect this budget, so if I could draw your attention up to 6,100 payroll. So the reductions that were in the 24-25 budget for payroll are reflected in that reduction of payroll. So we started the year with less payroll. Then the saves are on top of that because, for example, we're still working through, we have estimates of the middle school PLC, we have estimates of the instructional support specialists, but those were changes that we were making with people. And so we are going through that process. And so the totals are reflected there, but they are not all reflected in like that 6,100. Now, the increases that you see here, for example, recruitment budget or second step SEL platform, those aren't added into the 62, 63 budgets yet because they have not been viewed by the board. So if we go through tonight and you all say this is our blessing, then I will go enter those into the system, and the next time you see this, it'll be represented there. But this gives the board the opportunity to review these adds and changes.
Okay, so as a result of the feedback you get tonight, you will be reducing the proposed expenses?
Yes,
based upon
ma'am.
our fee-
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So on slide 12, so on the historical vacancy save, $6 million, that's every year?
It's been historically, yes. I've looked over the last, I think I looked at 5 years. No, I looked at 4 years back because 5 years back was getting wonky with the pandemic. So I only looked at 4 years back. And then I had to remove anything that was put into ESSER. And so I only were able to consider the actual payroll. Now, if we begin to fill these vacancies, then that estimate could change. It isn't really all made up of just unfilled positions. Really, the mass majority of that is made up of the time it takes when someone leaves versus hiring them. And so there is always, it doesn't matter, going to be some kind of saves as the ebb and flow goes through the year. Now, it's, it could adjust as as your hiring practice just changed. It's just, and that's why I put it there as expected, because it's something that needs to be forecasted every single month, every single year, and then communicated to the board as you go.
Okay, so what percentage of the salaries is that?
Let me do some math here. I think it's about, I think it's about 4%, which has been pretty consistent with budgets that I've seen in the past. Yeah,
historical?
it's a little over 4%.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Historical non-payroll saves, what is that?
That's also kind of the ebb and flow. It isn't necessarily everybody just leaving money on the table. What happens, because we have 17 campuses and then a bunch of central departments, and they all have budgets. And so as they're going through the year, they have planned expenses. They're moving through the year, and sometimes they might estimate a program to be, they're going to spend this much on it, it ends up being a little less, or the timing runs out, or they shift gears. It's kind of a natural ebb and flow too. Sometimes you just simply order something and it doesn't arrive by June 30th, and then you have to pay for it in the next year. It's not really a savings. You still have to pay for it. It just reflects on paper to be a savings for one fiscal year.
I used to describe this as if you were afraid to overspend too. So there's always going to be
Yes.
some dollars that are left, and at some point we capture all those dollars.
And we also initiate purchasing deadlines, or, so then limits purchasing. So if you didn't plan ahead, or, things like that.
Okay. That's all I have on those pages. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Colton. We have time. This is what this night is for, if you find some more. Do we have any other questions or comments so far? Trustee Vera Cruz?
Thank you so much for your informative session with us. I see on page 12, it says positions reductions through attrition. Can you explain what attrition means? And then it says assistant principals, aides, central office, 365,000. So is that if we eliminate, is that what that number means?
So those were, and so I use the word attrition to further clarify what we did, so that we don't say we just got rid of people, because that isn't what the board decided to do. So it's really just for communication purposes.
Thank you.
Yes, but what happens when building this budget and looking at and reviewing at positions, there were some changes made to positions that determined that some positions were going to be sunset. But maybe there was a person in that position. Well, the board or the district was not going to remove a position that had a person in it. So when the person moved on, then that position was taken back. So that's through attrition. And so it really kind of puts the focus on support of our staff while still maintaining the ability to reduce and be fiscally responsible. What happened is the board, through support of the superintendent and the business office, and the whole SLT team, determined that there were some assistant principals and some aides that were going to be reduced. And so they were, because of the timing of the decision, some of the positions still had people in them, they were put into the budget. And so this is just reflecting that, how much it affected 24-25's budget when we're just looking, how do we get from this number to this number? And then the central office are the positions that were related to central office, and that's the total there. And I do believe you have some documentation in your binders that identifies which specific positions this is referring to.
Thank you.
Trustee McNeely?
We're under the gun because we're doing it in July. If we went from September to September, does it make it easier for us to make these kind of decisions? Because we're making them when we don't know what we're getting from the state.
Well, that's a great question. So we have, obviously, so we have two opportunities as a school district for fiscal year. So we can be September 1 through August 31st, or we can be July 1 through June 30th, which is what we are. So there's give and takes for both of those. So if you're June 30th, then you're building your budget based on a tax rate that you don't really know your taxable values yet. That used to be a whole big problem back before the state funding formula changed, that kind of kept us the same. So because of that, we can build a budget while total, like local and state revenue could offset, fundamentally the total's gonna be similar. But it is a weakness because we are having to adopt a budget based on a tax rate and an estimated taxable value that we're unsure of. That's because we don't know that till July 25th. The benefit of having a July budget is that campuses, when they come, and departments, when they come into July 1, they can start planning for that next fiscal year. When you're a campus or department and you're in a September 1, you in school and you still have to have money ready to start school. And that takes a lot of forethought and plan. It's just very difficult. So that's a weakness of that kind of budget. I've been in both types of districts. Even though your budget isn't adopted until August 31st, you're still building it well before July. So you're still doing all your budget workshops and all your budget planning without the same knowledge. You just might have an opportunity to dive in at the last minute and make a change. That's really, but the benefit is, I think, our campuses and departments being able to better plan as they go into their school year.
So we could adopt a budget on the 29th of June?
Oh, I don't know what day that is. Is that a weekend? I mean, yes, you have to have a budget adopted by June 30th.
You can call a special meeting.
Which, yeah,
and
of
do
course.
that.
It has to be adopted by June 30th, according to law. I don't, if you're regarding to how that might affect the legislative changes, it would depend on the language of the law. Before it said it had to be adopted after.
I go back to, if we adopt, or we're really not adopting, we could save 4,000 or 3,000 or 2,000, but we're not adopting them until we adopt the budget.
That's correct. Well, the compensation manual.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not official until we adopt the budget? Or are you asking us to
It's
certify?
official when the compensation manual is adopted. The budget gives the money to support the decision in the compensation manual, but the compensation manual drives the salaries for TRS purposes.
Trustee Colton?
So, Mrs. Mayo, would you please explain again slide 14?
Yes. So this lists all the items that are projected for add and reduction. So for example, campus closure estimates at the top, 800,000. That's the estimated amount of payroll and non-payroll that we have estimated just based on statewide data if a campus is closed for 1 year. And so that is an estimate reduction. The item, and that's just for 1 year because our campus, 2 of them are closing only for 1 year. That could change once we get into the data. This TASB salary study is a request to do a TASB salary study, but the funds needed to do that are not in the current operational budget, and so it's being requested on top, but only for 1 year. So in the next budget year, that would come out. And then that's how they are at the top. And then the 25 and 26 future years, those are budget reductions or adds that will affect the budget ongoing unless there is a reduction or changed in a future year.
Okay, so these are the only new additions to the budget?
As of today, yes.
Okay, so does this also identify all the proposed cuts that you all were looking at?
Yes. Not the expected saves from salary vacancy saves or any of the expected items. Those really have to be realized as you go through the year.
Because I thought that more cuts had been identified other than the 4 that are listed. I thought we had a greater list. I thought it was like 2 million. And, yeah.
It's it's a little over 2 million, but when we start, it's over that, but when we put the ads back in, it offsets it down. So the 2.098 reduction includes all the ads. I think before today, you had only seen the reductions. These ads this is the first time for you to see these ads.
So were these reductions identified? What process did we use to identify these reductions?
So I'll start at the top. For the campus closure estimates, I did analysis and basically looked at some statewide data on what happens when a campus closes. So you save non-payroll, you save utilities, you save some positions. In our example, because we are not reducing people, our people, so teachers go with the kids, we know that. But in some instances, office staff probably would not be duplicated. Because our campuses are reopening, we didn't make a permanent change, so only vacant positions would be held out of the budget. So I didn't assume the full expected savings. In addition to that, I only didn't reduce the utilities down as much, because anytime you have a campus that's closed, you still have to have utilities. You can't turn it all the way off. But because we will have workers in the building, I still expected that there's going to be some draws on utilities that are probably not there if it's completely closed. So I took the average analysis from statewide data of closed campuses and then pulled it back to make it more conservative. It was my analysis and assumption. I couldn't find another district that had done something like this, and so I reviewed it with Dr. Gorey, and we decided this was a conservative number. It could likely be more savings than we see. But I wanted to be conservative because I wanted to make sure you had your planning tools. The middle school PLCs, HR worked with TASB to review the PLCs, and they reviewed all the data and all the positions at the middle school, and that analysis was done by TASB through the TASB study. Instructional support specialists, that was also work done through TASB. When I reviewed them, some of them are federally funded, so I reviewed position by position and identified only the positions and benefits that affect the general fund. That's reflected there. The utility saves was also done because we're adding HVAC systems all throughout the district through the bond. I used statewide estimates to identify per square footage what a possible savings could be for the HVAC systems we have already added. We are continuing to add them, so that number could also increase as those get added. And then the unused allowances, phone, travel, that was just done by reviewing line by line position budgets and doing year over year analysis and determining that we weren't using some of those year out of year, so we took them out.
And so for clarity, the middle school PLC savings, that $1 million, that is because instead of our middle school teachers having 2 prep periods or 2 opportunities to have PLC, now they'll have 1, which means that they can teach more classes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Lean on my experts.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Phillips?
Ms. Mayo, would you give us some explanation behind the Lead with Impact assets and experiences? What is that?
So I will lean on Ms. Wallace for that. That goes directly related to the items needed for our strategic communication plan.
Good evening, Dr. Flowers, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Goree. So the work that we have been engaging in with Holsworth for the past 2 years, that is our leadership definition, which is Lead with Impact. And so what we want to do now is really make sure that it's pervasive across our campuses so that we can cascade the message down to all the way from our upper leadership to our campus leadership, teachers, and eventually to our students. And with Lead with Impact, the ultimate goal there is that we are aligning our talent systems with all of our processes for identifying, hiring, and selecting teachers and leaders for our district. And so it's really just the assets, the communication tools, the visuals that you'll see at campuses in the district offices, at campus conference rooms, when they're working with their different teachers and leaders during PLCs, so that they can refer back and say, this is our leadership definition, this is what we are about here in Duncanville ISD, and so that it becomes, people speak about it with automaticity. They are clear about what we expect here in our district.
So where did the 50,000 come from? Like, is this close to what we did this year? How do we come up with $50,000?
So it is reflective of some of the funds that we just kind of pulled together out of our existing budget this year, and with adding an additional about $25,000 to that. So one of the things that we were able to do this year out of our existing budget, we purchased signage for the campuses, so that in their boardrooms, excuse me, my voice is a little raspy, so that they had one of each of the signs. So the Lead with Impact, the categories, the place, we call it a placemat, which has our competencies. They receive 3 signs per campus. But really, in order for us to make this very well-known and clearly communicated throughout our district, we're really needing to ramp up the signage. We're needing to have different tools and resources available. One of the things that we want to do is bring together a group of teachers and leaders this summer, which would cost us money to do, so that they can help us to craft or create experiences or a toolkit for campus leaders to have at their fingertips, so that when we focus on drive growth, which is one of our areas, when we focus on drive growth, they can have a toolkit to use with their staff so that they can actually do experiences with them about what does it really mean to drive growth in Duncanville ISD. So, but in order to make some of those experiences happen, we would need extra duty funds. And so while it says assets and experiences, that would be one of the experiences that we would be pulling together a group of teachers and leaders to craft so that we can carry that forward into the campuses.
Are you okay with me speaking now?
Trustee Phillips?
Thank you. Okay, I understand, the signage and the toolkits. What about online toolkits? We're trying to work through attrition to save some money, $50,000 to put signs up to remind people. It just seems like to me, it just makes no sense. Online toolkits, is that an option?
Absolutely, and we definitely intend to have a place to curate all of our assets on our website, and we will definitely make that happen. And if the decision is that we don't have the funds to actually put the physical signage up, then we will definitely adjust. When I say experiences, I think that is critical in order for us to cascade the message and make it pervasive in the district. But that would require us to have additional funds to pay our teachers and leaders that we are going to invite to help us create those so that they're not done in isolation, because this is not a a project that we wanted just to be something that we feel these will be great things to help people understand. We really want to lean in on the boots on the ground, the teachers, the leaders, and put their minds at work to help us create some of those experiences that then principals, it'll alleviate some of the things that they may need, because then they will be able to just grab and go, use those with their staff to communicate out.
Sounds like balloons to me, but, I'm over it.
I was thinking the same.
Trustee Fahey?
Are we talking balloons and glitter and the pretty stuff?
Absolutely not. We're
Okay,
more so
because-
talking about a lesson plan.
Okay, because I
yes.
wasn't sure about the craft. Okay, I wasn't sure really what we were speaking of.
So when I did use the word craft, so
Well,
that we could come together and craft. And what I meant by that is create. So as a group of teachers and leaders, we want to invite them to the table so that we can, all year, for the past couple of years, we've been teaching our principals and assistant principals about the different competencies and the categories associated with Lead with Impact, which is our leadership definition. And so when we bring the teachers and leaders together this summer, we will be inviting them to help us create lesson plans that the principals could then take back to their campus. So if we designate September as Drive Growth Month, they will have a toolkit of already designed experiences that they can lead with their teachers and leaders, so then they can understand what it means to drive growth in Duncanville ISD. And the significance there is that it does alleviate the need for principals across the district to have to come up with those ideas themselves. And because our hiring practices, our professional development is all rooted in our leadership definition, that's where we're trying to be very systematic in our approach to the work.
Thank you. Trustee Fahey?
So when you mention lesson plans, I mean, is this like part of Blue Bonnet, or is it one of the curriculums? I mean, how does it,
No,
is it something extra?
It is something, it's not, when I say lesson plan, I'm speaking of a tool or a resource that a principal can use. So every principal, they host monthly staff meetings, right? And so whenever they stand in front of their staff, in order to introduce Drive Growth, then they would have a plan of action that they can say, this is how I'm going to introduce what it means to drive growth in Duncanville ISD. So it's not a lesson plan that, in the same sense as a teacher lesson plan in their classroom, but in a similar fashion.
And it's a Holdsworth idea? Okay.
Yes,
All
it
right.
is the body of work. It is us taking our learning from Holdsworth for the past couple of years to the next level.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Dr. Goree, we would just like to challenge you to adjust that $50,000 Lead with
Absolutely.
Impact and like solidify if there's a workshop or some type of experiences, how many teachers are we talking about? How many days? But as we go through all of the time for cost containment, $50,000 for assets and experiences we don't feel like that's good stewardship.
Thank you. And let me thank the board too for your feedback. It's helpful as we go through the budget to continue to be impactful with those things that the board supports, because that is important that the board supports it. Thank you.
Trustee Colton.
I would like to see us devote attention towards literacy. Like, can we give books to kindergartners,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to see if you can bring something like that we can include in the, I'm just one person, but I'm just asking.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Goree and I started this conversation a couple of weeks ago, Trustee Colton, and we are working on addressing that literacy gap to have that conversation with the board. And I can definitely see a better use of $50,000.
Right. In fact, very soon there will be a formal presentation of our district literacy plan presented to the board, which we're really excited about.
So it'll be before we adopt a budget?
So that presentation will come after the adoption of the budget, but again, we can directly show you how that budget is how that program is impacted in the budget that you will adopt. And one thing I do want to add too is that a part of this work, and this came as we worked through some of the things when Dr. Bigby was here doing our cost containment, is that we're working on a financial manual that will specify when we do things like buy food, will specify decorations and what that looks like. And you know, I think that, you know, we are the city of champions, but we too understand and agree that in some of our decoration settings, we have to scale back based on where we are fiscally. Even as I've worked closely with Ms. Dr. Nix around things like our Camp Panther, which is usually on steroids. But again, looking at how we can scale that back to show respect to our fiscal situation.
So I had a question on 14. It's really not about page 14, but it's really more for Dr. Goree. Have we considered options to, I'm thinking about reimbursements and travel and those things. In past district, we had like district vans for SLT or teachers or particular administrators, so that instead of paying individual mileage and gas for 12 people that are all traveling to Austin, that it's contained in a couple of vans or buses or something like that. And it was very cost effective.
Absolutely. And I'm looking over Mrs. Moore because we are in the process of doing this very thing. We are actually working through a couple of options around what's called white fleet, where you have those district vehicles so that you can be more efficient when you're traveling, say, to Austin or to different places. So we are certainly in the process of doing that. Not a part of this budget because the group that we were working with actually ended up being a budget increase. But we do know that there are ways to work around that. So we are working to identify different vendors in that respect.
Trustee Colton?
So I have a question regarding the grants. Could we get a grant update? I mean,
Yes,
not
ma'am.
now, but.
Right. I will
Yes, sir.
we'll write that question down.
Yes, sir.
We'll add that to the note too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while we're doing notes, the Champions Choice event was incredible. And I'm just wondering, is that the best number that we could come in with? 239, 814? And how much of that are we doing? $239,000. I'm just wondering what's involved in that.
So I will go back and look at that again. And, you know, I do know that Dr. Nix's division as well as Ms. Wallace's division has worked on that, and it's actually down, believe it or not. But what you saw happen this year was that because it was not a budgeted amount, a dollar amount, we all had to scramble to pull together the resources to do that. But let me assure you that we will review that again. And again, it was a steroid type event, so we will review that to make sure that it is something that our community is super excited about, because I do believe and we know that choice is going to be critical as we move forward. So we will look at that to make sure that we cannot adjust that sum and still have an amazing event.
Thank you. And we're not talking about compromising quality.
No, not at all. And I don't perceive it that way at all.
Okay. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Mayo regarding the PowerPoint? My questions aren't regarding the PowerPoint. Thank you, Ms. Mayo.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on anywhere else in the binder before I start. I'll save for last. Okay. Going once, going twice. So my question, these pages aren't numbered, but it's the teacher salary schedule 2024-25 school year. It's immediately after teacher pay scale. We desperately needed a pagination for this. Yes. So I just have a question about, could we consider adding a column for doctorate? We are an educational institution and we are promoting teachers to continue their education, and we don't offer an additional stipend for a doctorate degree. And we are one of the few districts that don't do that. And so I'm just wondering if that's been discussed.
Has not been discussed, but we absolutely can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Fahey, I'm sorry, Trustee Colton.
I have a question regarding the teacher salary schedule, and looking, there's what, $11,200 difference in a teacher with 0 years and with 30 years. So this schedule is set by how is the schedule set?
Good evening. The schedule is set to give teachers, well, of course, with more years of experience, a higher rate of pay. And so most teacher salary scales, increase by step. And as Ms. Mayo discussed, the legislature is proposing possibly that teachers with higher levels of experience have an even greater increase. And so this kind of models that already.
Okay, so the state will have to address that, and I guess my observation relates to, you take somebody with 0 years of experience, they're making $58,500, but then you look at teachers that have 30, and they're only making, $11,200, that's 30 years. But you're saying that, I guess, the state is going to have to address that, and we have no control over this?
You can go.
I was going to say, our teacher step schedule kind of models other teachers' step schedules where you increment. Some districts give $300, just for every step, and they just work their way up until you get to the last year, whether it be 30 years, 35 years, or things of that nature. And so actually on our step schedule, it kind of increases as you get higher, but the teacher's salary schedule is whatever the board adopts and approves, so it could vary by step. As Ms. Mayo said, the legislature is proposing that they could, for example, and I don't want to jump too much in her lane, but they could propose, for example, that teachers 10 years or more, get a certain increment. It could be 20 years or more. And so just depending on what the legislature proposes, then teachers at the higher end of the salary schedule may get a different step increase than those at the lower end, depending on what they pass.
And the one thing I was going to add is that this is a part of that salary study that we'll be doing to make sure that our teacher pay is aligned to what industry says it should be at those certain levels. And that's an age-old issue in education, is that those jumps and increments just have never been large in the teaching field.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of our teachers are not, they don't have long tenure.
Right.
Yeah, so, maybe if the scale provided, a greater salary at the higher end, we might be able to attract some of the other teachers from other districts if, their schedules look like this. So I'm glad that you all will be looking at this.
Thank you.
This doesn't have a page number, but it's I'm still in the compensation manual, and it's the pay grade AP2 assignment. My question is, there's a social worker listed here. How many social workers do we have?
Good evening. We had 2 social workers for the 24-25 school year, but moving into next year, that would be 1.
Okay, and so what differentiates our social worker from our school counselors?
So our social workers currently had the license in social work, and so they were licensed social workers in addition to doing school. They could, provide counseling services as well. And so I know some of the support counselors and some of the student services and campus support team will be taking on the role and some of the duties to support in the absence of that one social worker.
So if we didn't have a social worker, then that position would be a traditional counselor?
A lot of those things would be supported from the counselor, yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm not asking if we cut the social worker. I'm just wondering are all of our counselors, let me stick to my notes. Are our counselors receiving SES training? And if so, how often? Are there certifications given because of that? Are our counselors equipped to provide SES?
And you're referring, and I'm going to speak, but you're referring to the social emotional learning counselors? Yes, so our counselors.
No. Our regular counselors, not the support counselors.
So I do know the support counselors, and they have monthly counseling PLCs where they do provide some of those social emotional strategies. I'm going to ask Mr. Graham to come up since he can provide more detail about their training.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening to Dr. Flowers, to all other trustees, and to Dr. Gorey. Our counseling department does have our monthly PLCs with all counselors, and they do social emotional learning, professional development with them. We're also working on ensuring that our teachers receive that same SEL professional development, as we want to move it down to that level to ensure that our students are receiving that type of help from our teachers.
And who's providing the professional development to the counselors, and who's providing it to the teachers, and when?
Currently, our director of counseling provides the training to all of our counselors. And that happens monthly. They have monthly PLCs with all of the counselors. And we're also having on campus, the high school also has PLCs directly from the lead counseling specialist with the counselors on that particular campus. Now, if they have SEL monthly, I don't know that, but we do get that monthly from the director of counseling.
Okay, so monthly, all of the counselors are getting SES training.
Yes.
So they should technically be able to provide that same social emotional support to all of our students.
In a way, they should, but let's remember that our social workers have received specialized training through their college, and they will have a more in-depth knowledge of that type of training and professional development that they have received.
But we're talking about one. We have one for the entire district.
Yes. So in that case, we do have our social emotional learning specialists now that will have to get trained more from that one social worker to ensure that they're providing some extra help in those areas where we're trying to be more efficient, since we won't have that extra social worker anymore.
So all of our counselors, if we're going to give our students what they need, we shouldn't need an additional category of counselors like social workers, when our counselors can get the same training so that they can provide that. And if we only have 1 or 2, then our kids are still not getting what they need.
So there are a few other things that our social workers do besides just that. Now, you do have the pantry that will take a little bit more help that we'll need in order to ensure that is being run properly as well. So efficiency, of course, is what we want to do in the department, and we're going to do whatever it takes to ensure that students get what they need. Now, that means that if that means getting more software programs that's going to help us deliver SEL directly to the students better, if that ensures that we get our restorative aides and our SEL counselors trained better so they can provide more support. But of course, our goal is to be efficient. So whatever we have to do to ensure that people are getting what they need, we're going to do.
So that's what we want to know. Like, what type of training are we providing and support so that our counselors can give our kids what they need? And does it have to be a social worker that works with the pantry?
It does not have to be a social worker. And in fact, since we only have the one now, we will use some of our restorative aides and some of our SEL counselors to help that one social worker now.
Okay. Trustee Colton.
So didn't we have more social workers before?
We had 2 this year. I don't know previously before this year.
Ms. Brown, are you aware of any more than that? I'm not.
So what are the duties of the social worker?
So we'll start off with the food pantry, and of course, that's ensuring that, you said?
Oh, yeah, no, okay, yeah, because you talked about the food pantry, but I'm just wondering, you know, in these days and times, I can see a need for more social workers. So I'm just wondering kind of what all the social worker does. We know, you know, the pantry.
So the next thing is providing services. So when we have students that come in that need McKinney-Vento services, or just to know exactly what we have in the district, that social worker is the first person that contacts that student to let them know exactly what we have. Then there are several different programs throughout the district. You have the Christmas, what is it called? The Christmas Angel Tree, several other programs like that that our social workers work with also. So it's meeting with students throughout the year. They have a caseload. Normally they have between 80 to 100 students that both of them actually meet with to ensure that those connected services that they provided are actually working, and if not, they continue to meet with that parent to ensure that they can get them what they need.
Okay, and so are we sufficiently staffed to take care of that?
Currently, we are sufficiently staffed to take care of the needs of the district.
I wouldn't say we're sufficiently staffed with one social worker, but I'm saying I would say that we're sufficiently staffed if all of the counselors see this as part of their responsibility. The disadvantage I see with having 2 social workers is then the students that have real needs, their counselors are not aware of them, and they are all of the counselors' jobs. So if all of our counselors had the same training, because there's not a social worker degree required to work with the pantry, it's just an adult that knows what the students need and can communicate with the parent. And if the counselors are doing this all 4 years, then I just think that we're strengthening our counseling team to make sure that they have those skills.
And I do agree with that. And when you think about the social worker and being that first point of contact, once they start meeting with that child, they should have that relationship with that counselor to let them know that this child is receiving these particular services. And as I trade them off to you, I expect for you to continue to ensure that they're getting the services that they need to be successful.
If I could add one thing, Dr. Flowers, and first of all, I fully agree. But when I think about some of the services, and it was a tough decision, even as we went from 2 to 1, because let me agree that in a district with 12,000 kids, you wonder, well, what is 1 or 2 helping? Nevertheless, if you look at this as our most severe situations, this is when you really see the social worker get involved, and that's that caseload of about 100 kids that Mr. Graham referenced. So they are working with those most difficult situations. What I will say, though, is that we know that our counseling department is going to have to pick up some of the slack just because you're now down to 1 person, and we know that 100 kids number is not going to change. But again, as we go through budget cuts, these are some of the hard decisions that we face because we have to cut something or we'll make no progress. So, but again, let me agree with you that we will continue to expand upon our counseling supports, even as we continue to look at the positions like our restorative people, people in that space. We'll continue to look at how we can fine tune the work.
Thank you. Trustee Phillips.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Graham, you mentioned programs that you might need to get the counselors up to speed to where the social workers are. could you explain what type of programs you would need to get them, to prepare them for that role?
So right now, actually, I'll go back to priority 2 in the strategic plan, which deals with SEL. And our goal is to ensure that what gets monitored gets done. We've been using SEL programs before where we couldn't get good data on if they were actually using the programs or not. So we did add a budget item to add this program called Second Step to our, for 6th through 8th grade, to our programming. And with that, now we can get good data on when counselors go into the classrooms or when teachers are actually using the program. How are the students using it? Is it making a difference? How often are they using it? All of the data that we need to ensure that we're actually running an SEL program. So as we're talking about getting it down to the student level, this is what we're referring to. When our director of counselor now meets with our counseling team and with our social workers, they're going to go through that particular platform to ensure that our counselors go into the room and use that, and also help our teachers use it to ensure that we're getting data on the usage of that particular platform.
Okay, thank you. So Second Step only costs us $8,400?
Well, it's addition to what we're already paying for it. Mhm. And that's a great question that I'll have that answer later. Yes, ma'am.
So who's monitoring this program?
So right now, you'll have the director of counseling along with the counselors on the campus that will be using it. And of course, I will be monitoring it along with the director of counseling.
Okay, thank you.
What are you exactly monitoring?
We're monitoring usage rates. We're monitoring effectiveness of the program. So if we're looking at one of the areas might be relationship building. And what we like to say about SEL, it's not effective when it's in isolation. It should be embedded into the curriculum. It should be embedded into what we're doing daily. Now, these programs can take a TEK and they can actually create a lesson around that particular TEK and embed relationship skills into that particular lesson to see and create an exit ticket or some other type of curriculum item where we can measure if teachers are using it. Now, again, when it goes to effectiveness of it, that's going to be a little bit harder to measure, but ultimately using it first. We have to get something where we know that teachers are actually using it, and that's the first step.
So we have a plan to monitor who's monitoring it, and we have an expected outcome, because we've approved so many more programs and things, and if they're not used with fidelity or if there's not buy-in, and you weren't here, I'm just saying, I don't want this, we don't want to see another purchase of a program with it addressing a philosophical need. So I would like to see next time or whenever you bring it back, like some logistics. What does this look like for somebody to use it in the classroom?
And I 100% agree with you, because again, I believe in what gets monitored gets done. And what gets monitored publicly gets done faster. So therefore, we will have some data on whether the SEL program is working or not.
That's what we need. Trustee Veracruz, did you have a question? Trustee Fahey.
Thank you. Do we have both support counselors and academic counselors, or it's all in one?
So we
At
have
elementary and secondary, I want to know.
We have basically 3 layers of counseling in the district.
Okay.
So you have your comprehensive counselor at the school that does your day-to-day counseling for that particular child with grading and day-to-day behavioral issues or anything of that nature. Next, we have our support counselors, which are our SEL counselors and our restorative aid counselors. And when we start talking about response to intervention, they are basically our level 2 counselors when we have students that are having academic issues and behavioral issues that comprehensive counselor may not be able to solve, or they may not have the time to actually deal with, and we need some extra support for that particular child. Our third level is our wraparound counseling services, where we use Hamilton Counseling that you approved a few months ago that provides those interventions on those intensive students that we're referring to. Our support from our social workers also come into play to ensure that if that child needs those intensive supports, they can help our wraparound counselors, and they, of course, help all three levels of counseling to ensure that the parents are involved and they're getting the services that they need.
I thought of something else. So that means eighth graders who are planning their future at the high school, who helps them select the course of study?
So
the
that's
plans?
that's their comprehensive counselor.
That's a comprehensive?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So my next question is about ESL and LOT. I don't know if anybody here can respond to that. I'm wondering, where did I write my question? What's the update on this department? Because I see we have a coordinator, what's the update on that department? LOT and ESL.
I can get you an update. I'm just, right now, are you talking in terms of the staffing of that department or in terms of the impact of that department?
The staffing. I'm looking on, it's not paginated, but we have a specialist, ESL LOT. We also have a coordinator for ESL LOT.
Okay, so
So Dr. Nick, she's looking at the compensation manual. I think what she's at, the question is, you just wonder what staff could comprise of that department now,
Yes.
today?
okay, I can get you an update on that. I just don't have that in front of me now.
Okay.
We can get an
So I can take a look at that. I just want to make sure I get you what you need. I'll take a look at the ESL and LOT department and give you the most updated org chart for that department or where we are.
Yes, because I'm wondering if we could if we could clean up our compensation
Absolutely.
manual
That's what
to
she said. Okay,
reflect
that's the answer.
jobs that we really
Got it.
have.
Okay.
That's really what I'm asking. If we could clean it up, I don't really need reports,
Got
but
it.
if we could clean it up to reflect
Absolutely.
the jobs we really have, because I'm looking at some and I know like some don't exist, but we have them here.
Got it. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Flowers, thank you for that. I think that would answer your question. But I also think we can provide you a list of those employees that do fill those administrative positions.
And if we could get like a definite, like if we have SEL counselors are, if I could get a list, if we could get a list of everybody on the admin pay scale. Because what we have now is not everyone.
And yeah, we absolutely can do that. Yes, we provided the directors and above, but we absolutely can do that.
Okay. With the thought in mind of cleaning up what we don't have existing right now. Okay.
Absolutely.
And for collegiate, we have principal, dean, counselor.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. We have we have a principal of collegiate, we have an assistant principal, dean, Ms. Lee, and then we have a counselor. Yes, ma'am.
So that is AP/dean. Those are not two different people.
No, ma'am. We just have one assistant administrator, which we call an academic dean, if you will, for collegiate. And what she does is spend a lot of her time at Mountain View College, because part of our MOU is that someone needs to be there with
Yes.
those children. And so the principal is able to be at Collegiate Academy at the location, Duncanville High School, while that allows Ms. Lee to be over at Mountain View to fulfill our MOU with the college, to be there with those students.
Okay. I saw dean listed, but sometimes I hear AP of collegiate, and I didn't know if those were two different positions.
No, ma'am, that's the same position.
Okay. if you're gonna clean that up, I don't have to ask
think
all of
that
these.
helps, yeah.
That helps. Okay, that'll address if you do that. Thank you. Trustee Fahey.
Dr. Flowers and Dr. Gorey probably can answer this. The job descriptions, some were done like last spring, 2024. Some have just recently been done. Who do the job descriptions?
So a big, huge thank you to Pam Brown and her team,
Okay, all right.
who have worked with our staff to update our job description. In fact, that's one of my goals, is that we will go through and update all of our job descriptions. And we started with SLT.
Thank you for that, because I've often wondered just what the positions were responsible to do. Thank you.
And so some of the organizational charts will be adjusted as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right, and if you look at the compensation manual, that is last year's manual because the new one has not been approved yet. And our goal as we go into the new ones was to remove those positions that quite frankly no longer exist.
And my last question is, can you tell me a little bit about the police communications supervisor that's proposed?
I can't. Chief Guerin. All right, I'm going to invite the interim chief to come and give some information on that.
Dr. Flowers, trustee members, Dr. Gorey. So the police communications supervisor position is one that will directly supervise the dispatchers in communications, as well as be our NCIC and TCIC, which stands for National Crime Information Center and Texas Crime Information Center. Point of contact. So there are a lot of regulations around certifications for dispatchers, for police officers, and everyone that has access to criminal justice information. And so we need one person that's in charge of making sure that all of our certifications stay current. Right now, I've got our safety coordinator serving as an interim dispatcher. This position, filling it and filling the dispatch positions, will free her up to be able to do her job. And those are two separate and distinct jobs.
I guess I'm confused by the police communications. So the communications part is throwing me off.
Okay, so in my experience, communications has to do with radio dispatch, 911 call taking, those kinds of communications, as opposed to, say, public information or the job that Ms. Wallace does.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So this person is supervising dispatchers?
Correct. Yes, ma'am. And would be doing the job of dispatching as well. I need, my goal is to make sure that we have a dispatcher on the radio whenever we have officers in the field or working an event. We can't afford to have officers out there without a lifeline to call in. We'll, in the process of creating this position and filling the vacancies, we will work on adjusting our scheduling so that we can have that either overlapping with a schedule or adjusting overtime to make sure that we have that dispatcher in position whenever officers are, again, working in the field or working an event.
So would this police communication supervisor also serve as dispatcher?
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so then this is not two different, we don't have a dispatcher and police communication person.
Correct. We would have, so we have a security dispatcher right now. My goal is to get her the police certification so that everyone that is a dispatcher can be a police dispatcher, whether they sit on the radio for the security side or the next day they sit on the police side, so that we have that level of competency. The supervisor would also sit on a terminal or sit as a dispatcher, serve that function, but would have supervisory oversight of the dispatch center as well.
Okay. That was my last question. Any additional questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much again to all the trustees. I do look forward as we work up to our next work session, of course, continuing our one-on-one meetings around the budget. And certainly, I will be reaching out to ensure that what we bring meets the needs of the board as we meet the needs of our children. Thank you.
Being that there is no further items to discuss, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Good night.